Hi everybody, it's Brett here at Tabletop Sagas, and this week I actually had a conversation with one of my friends about how there isn't enough tutorials for various different miniatures in the historical wargaming sphere. Well, this got me thinking, and I was trying to figure out a best way to explain it to him that perhaps you don't need to have a video for the exact model that you're trying to paint. Instead, what you should really be looking at with tutorials is how to adapt the lessons that the person's teaching and apply them to the minis that you're painting. So with that in mind, what I'm going to be doing today is I'm actually going to take my last two historical miniature videos, so my Mongolian cavalry and my Song Chinese infantry, and we're going to kind of blend those two together, and I'm going to go and talk through a bit of what bits I'm taking from which of those videos and how it is that we're coming to the final fully painted miniatures. I'll put timestamps and links and references to those old videos as well, but if you do want to go and watch those, do feel free to check them out down in the links below.
First of all, we're going to, as always, prime the models a nice coat of black that we can build up from, and then we're going to move straight on to airbrushing the base coats. So for the base coats, we're going to be using the Chinese infantry video to match the red. So with that, we're going to be beginning with having a terracotta red and then doing a zenithal of a nice bright red. And we're going to take some inspiration from that previous video by adding in a little bit of flow improver into the mix, because at this stage this is the first colour and we're going to be covering over it, so we don't care too much about accuracy and we just want to get this on nice and quick and nice and smooth. Once we've got that done though, then we are going to switch back to using some inspiration from the Mongolian cavalry video and back to my old way of airbrushing, so that means without any of the flow improver. What we need here is we need accuracy, so I'm taking off the needle guard and using that slightly thicker paint mix in order to really be able to cut in those lines nice and clear. That way we can have two base coats done with the airbrush. With that, that's the airbrushing out of the way, and we can put that to one side for now and move on to some brushwork. So with tutorials, it isn't always just about following them step by step, and you can actually use them, and arguably should use them, to try and iterate and improve on what you did previously. With that in mind, I previously in the Mongolian video painted the leather straps after I'd done all of the washing stage, and I don't want to do that here. Instead, as they're more of a background colour, I think I'm going to try painting them in before we do the washes, and that way, with any luck, they should blend in a little bit more naturally into the models and be more of a background colour, which is always what they're intended to be, but hopefully here they should still stand out against some of particularly the black horses. Next, it's coming up to finishing off the horse's hair. So this, taking inspiration from, again, the Mongolian video, it was just a case of choosing a darker tone for each of the colours that I'd used. So for the dark grey horses, I chose to have black tails and manes. For the lighter brown colours, I used a medium brown, and then for the dark brown, I got out a burnt umber, which is really, let's be honest, just a fancy word for saying dark brown. During the leather strap stage as well, I did notice that these Chinese do have small decorations hanging off the leather straps for the horses. So to keep them in line with the colour scheme that I'm going to be using for these models and avoid adding any additional colours for this one small bit, I brought back out that red and decided to tidy them up and add that back in. It's okay with this just to remember that it's fine to go back and cut back in to tidy things up as and when you need to. You're not always going to get everything right on the first time, and that's perfectly fine. So at this point, I switched over to working on the riders, and I wanted to do the first pass on the metals. Switching back to the Chinese infantry video, I had in that blocked in all of the metals in a black before painting them in silver. While I do say we can iterate here, it's also about taking useful techniques that we did gain from those previous videos and using those. So we are going to be keeping with that. That way it'll help to prevent the metals going on maybe a little bit too thin in places and then that red shining through, which we really don't want. So just gives a little bit more of a uniform colour. With this as well though, the reason why I decided to do it at the beginning was I wanted to make sure that this black had had plenty of chance to dry, I could evaluate it, and if I did need to do a second coat at any places, that was perfectly doable. So jump over to some other colours and then I'll come back to the metals towards the end. Sticking with the Chinese infantry video as inspiration, it's time to look at the background colour for the riders. So that's the boots, the trousers, parts of the headdress / helmet type things that they wear. This is where, as previously, we're going to see a limitation of these minis from Irregular Miniatures, and that simply is a lack of variety. And like with the infantry though, I wanted to try and give the impression that while this army was perhaps more uniform than the nomadic Mongols, they still are at a stage in history where uniforms weren't handed out by the state and you did kind of have to bring some of your own equipment. So for that, I put 2 different browns onto my palette. That was a khaki and a medium brown respectively, and then just switched between those 2 colours as I was painting up this step. So one rider, say for example, might get khaki trousers and then the other one might get khaki boots. Swap those round and just kind of mixing and matching as I thought was necessary. And similar to the last video, this is really just all about adding in a little bit of extra interest when somebody's looking into the model. It's not about following the guide exactly and trying to use the exact right colours or in the exact right order. One of the reasons why in my previous video I didn't actually mention colours is because it doesn't matter. It's not about what colour choice you use, instead it's about using those colours in the same way as the video had discussed. Next we're on to the skin. Now I have 2 videos already on my channel for painting Asian skin tones, one which I was definitely happier with than the other, so it was quite a simple choice for me. But this maybe does come down to personal preference. So what you want to be doing is you want to be comparing videos that you're maybe using for tutorials and pick steps from one that you like the look of and then steps from the other that you also like the look of and kind of meshing them together to get hopefully a model that you like overall better than just following any single tutorial. For this I'm going to be going in with the more yellowish tanned skin tone with the intention to knock it back during the wash stage, but making sure to avoid any heavily red pigmented flesh washes and instead relying on browns. With all the colours ready to go, it was finally a case then of switching back to the metals. I did have a look over these and I was happy that I had gotten even enough coverage, I would say, not quite 100% perfect, but close enough for the purposes of what I was doing. I decided to use a mid-coloured silver for this, in the same way that I have done in both of my other videos. The reason for that is because, again, we are going to be using a wash on these minis, and so I wanted to try and use something a little bit brighter, and we'll bring it back into a more perhaps reasonable colour. And with all that out the way and the colours blocked in and ready to go, things are looking really bright at this stage and very blocky. There's not a lot of definition in those colours, but referring back to the previous videos, we do know that that's going to be okay. We can see how they look at this stage and how they will look in the very next stage, which is the washes, of course. Taking inspiration first of all from the Mongolian video, I decided that I was going to wash the riders and the horses separate. This is because of drying times on the washes. I didn't want to run the risk of attempting to wash the entire model all in one go and then getting coffee staining as it starts to dry. The colour choice here is really simple. It is in almost the same way as what we did for the manes and the tails, so matching a darker wash colour with the base colour that we've chosen. For most, they get the lovely Agrax Earthshade, and then for the grey horses, they will be getting the ever popular Nuln Oil. Now, I've said in the past that I don't really like mentioning specific colours, but for these ones I do, and that's quite simply because I've just never found a better product. I'm not a massive fan of these paint pot styles, I much prefer dropper bottles, but in this case, when you're doing a wash and I just want to load up my brush, it's actually perfect. Never found anybody else that does a similar product or a better product. But if you have heard of one, I would love to try them out. I do like trying new paints. Do feel free to pop a recommendation down in the comments below and let me know. So for the riders, we are going to be copying from the Chinese infantry video, and they are going to be getting an all over brown wash, regardless of whether it's the metals, the reds, the skins, or the leathers, the trousers, browns, things like that. Now, for these, black might be let's say 5% better for the metals, but honestly at this scale it really doesn't matter. I don't think that it would be worth the extra time to switch out those washers and do 2 different ones, especially when you consider drying times and all that sort of stuff. Just not worth it. But with the washers done, I could easily leave these models now and have them on the tabletop and be more than happy with where they are. But as always, want to try and push them a little bit further. Like with the infantry, even though we did start with a red base coat, it was pretty much a case that was completely covered up, except for in a few small parts at this stage. With that, that's okay though. Red I find to be quite a tricky colour, hence why I do them as a base coat, even though I know that I'm going to be covering it up quite extensively. But I do want to bring it back up, so we go back in with that original red, the really bright one, and we just punch that colour up a little bit. With the metals as well, they're also major colour on these minis, so we do want to punch those up as well, again getting that bright silver and just bring it back on the top facing edges. So despite the lack of detail on these minis' faces, which is something that I will mention every time because I love these minis, they are really nice, but that's the one big failing that I do find with them. And since the faces though are something that we as humans will naturally look at on a model of a human, I have decided to do a little highlight on them and just punch them up a little bit so that you can at least easily pick out where the face should be. And just by choosing those 3 colours to focus on for maximum effect, like we did in the last video, that I do think really helps to elevate these minis. Iterating however on the Mongol video that I did before, I decided not to highlight up the horses. I want the focus to be on the riders of these minis, so I didn't exactly think that it was needed and figured why not just try it and see how it comes out. Again, it is that iterative process, and honestly it did the job. The horses go into the background maybe a little bit too much, but given that they're the largest part of the mini, maybe I should have done some highlighting. But hey, that's what iterating is all about. I will remember that for the next time. After all, we do have a lot more cavalry that I need to get through for the Mongolian army, and in those we can go back to highlighting up some of the cavalry. So for the bases we are using the Geek Gaming Scenics base ready range as always. We get some PVA glue onto these minis and then get them dunked into the box of the base ready range. I'm always going to leave these in for a little bit. That's just to give the glue the chance to absorb the material a little bit, start to dry, and really grab onto those aggregates rather than just quick dunk in, shake it off. And I do find that actually causes more to fall off than maybe I would like.
And there we have it, the finished miniatures. I will throw up some photos up here and you can see what you think. Hopefully you like them, I certainly do. And with any luck, this video has maybe given you some stuff to think about how you might use tutorials, or in my case, how I paint videos from YouTube. And not just going for raw to number, colour by colour, draw within the line sort of situation, but instead how you can adapt them and mix and match and blend different aspects together in order to get the effect that you're looking for on your miniatures. So thank you very much for your time today. I will see you soon. If you do want to help out the channel, do consider liking, subscribing, commenting, all that fun stuff down below, and I will see you next time.